Some say the holidays are about family, tradition, and the meaning it brings to you. Others say it's a time to give back to your loved ones. But for some, the holidays just aren't so merry. It's just an endless loop of chaos, crowds, and far too much tinsel. But if the twinkling lights make your eyes roll, if the cheerful carols test your patience, or if the holiday chaos feels a little too much, this painting's for you. So let's get this painting started off right with a primed and stained wooden panel and get right into the sketch, followed by an underpainting. For my underpainting, I'm going to be using an acrylic paint, and more specifically, I'm going to be using TriArt's high viscosity acrylics. TriArt reached out to me and sent me some of their acrylics to try out and see how I felt. Full disclosure, this is not a paid or sponsored video by any means. They simply sent me some products to try out and give my honest opinion on. So some of you might be wondering, why am I doing an underpainting? Why am I doing an acrylic? I thought this was an oil painting, but let me explain a little bit. An underpainting is a foundational layer in a painting, typically done in monochrome or in limited colors. It adds as a guide for the composition. It's sort of a blueprint, helping me define the placement of all the shapes and forms and get the overall design laid out before I begin more complex details. It also helps me establish some values. Because I'm only going to be using one color, I can really just focus on where the light and dark areas of the painting are. This is much easier to do with one color as opposed to your entire palette. This underpainting is also going to add a ton of depth to the painting. Because some portions of this layer is going to show through in the final image, it's just going to add that much more depth to the final image. And by doing this underpainting in one color, it's really going to help unify the painting and help support creating a complete image. Now, the main reason why I do my underpainting in acrylic versus oil paint is because typically when you're doing an underpainting with oils, you need to use a lot of solvents and thinners. And I like to have a solvent-free studio, so simply by doing this with an acrylic, I can avoid using all those harmful chemicals altogether. All right, now this is far more detailed than you'd ever need to do for an underpainting, but I really wanted to put these acrylics to the test, take them to their full potential and really see what they can do. And I am unbelievably impressed with how fantastic these acrylics are. There's a ton of pigment to them. They go on super smooth, super direct. So I want to thank TriArt for sending me these paints, and I'll leave a link down in the description where you can grab some yourself. For this painting, I'm going to be using some Ivory Black, Ultramarine Blue, Yellow Ochre, the unbelievably expensive Cadmium Red Lite, as well as the final last drops of my Titanium White. When it comes down to prepping my palette, I like to create different color zones, and I organize them from the darkest value and work up to the lightest value. The idea is not to mix every single tone and hue that's going to be on the painting. It's more to act like a guideline between what is going to be my darkest red in the painting, what's going to be some mid-tones, and then what is going to be the lightest red in my painting, and so on for each color group. And you know what? Sometimes I get it wrong. And after mixing a bunch of greens for the portrait, I just felt that it was too muddy of a green and too dull of a green, and I needed some more vibrance in there. And that's when I brought in the phthalo green. Phthalo green is a much higher chroma of a green than I was mixing and allowed me to get those really nice tones and values that I think are going to be perfect for the portrait. All right, so now that all my foundational work is done, we've got the underpainting completed, we've got my palette all done and prepped to go. Now all that's left to do is to start the oil painting. So let's officially start this oil painting. And let's start by eating the frog first. Well, not literally. When jumping into an oil painting, I really like to start with the most difficult thing to do first. And when you're doing a portrait painting, the most important thing is, well, the portrait. but more specifically, the features of the face, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. They say over your lifetime, a human can remember and recognize between 5,000 and 10,000 unique faces. What that means to you is that every single day, your brain is downloading information of what people look like. And when you're doing a portrait of somebody or something, or a character that is well recognized, it's really important that you get those features done correctly. Because if they're wrong or they're slightly off, the viewer will notice right away that something is wrong with this portrait. So by eating the frog first and by tackling these right out of the gate, I can use the majority of my energy to get these facial features correct so that the rest of the painting sort of feels easier as we go on. Okay, I think that's enough for the face right now. I'm gonna actually go in and finish up a bunch of these areas like the background and the suit. This green is gonna change how it looks once I put in the very vibrant red of the suit and the background here. So I wanna get the painting mostly completed before I go in and start finishing all these little details on the face. Let's jump into this background and start working on a suit here. Your backgrounds don't need to be too complicated. The whole idea behind a background in a portrait like this is to amplify the image. So just by having some interest in the background, some color variations, some tone variations, and keeping in mind where the light source is coming from, what you'll do is you'll create a background that really complements the piece. So I like to throw some other colors and hues that are already in the painting into my background. For example, mixing in some of the greens from the portrait into the background to get some form of unity in there. Now to add a little bit more texture and interest to this background, I took this really crappy art store brush and went back and brushed over some of the areas I already painted on the background. I just wanted to create some brushwork and add a little bit more texture to the background. Now that the background's done, I can really start piecing this painting together. I cut in a little bit on my sketch so that I can overpaint some of the fur on his face as well as some of his clothing to make a really nice smooth transition. So now let's go tackle that red suit of his. And this is where this painting's really gonna start to get exciting by painting the Santa suit. One thing I like to do is start from the darkest value and work to the lightest value. I do this because I like to paint my darks more transparent and my lights more opaque. So by sort of overpainting where the darks are, I can slowly correct the shapes and values as I work my way up to the lightest value. And for this painting, the vibrant Cadmium Red Light is the star of the show, and it really takes this painting to a whole new level. My goal as I work my way up the value scale is to try to be more direct with my brushwork. Think of the darks as like sloppy work and the highlights as just the cherry on top. And this hat is a good expression of this. As I get towards those final brush strokes, I'm being very careful to where I place my brush to avoid reworking those brush strokes in the painting. And here are those super cheap garbage brushes that are just so fantastic for painting fur. In my earlier years, I would try and paint almost every strand of fur by hand, and it was incredibly tedious and looked artificial. And that's because it was. But now, with these really splayed out loose brushes, I allow them to do most of the work for me. If I need to add a little bit of detail, sure, I can go in and add some at the end. But for the most part, just by being really loose with these brushes and allowing some happy accidents to happen, I can get a really nice fur texture. Now you can get a good idea of what I really meant by you seeing the true green. Now that the background's painted, his Santa suit is painted, you get a good idea of how that green is going to be situated in this painting. And I'm happy I did this because I was having a tough time with this face and I wasn't sure if the values were too washed out or if I needed some more vibrance. And now I got a good idea of what I gotta do to fix this. So while this paint's still wet, I gotta come over here and feather out some of his fur, but we're almost done here. So let's just finish up with these last few things and let's keep pushing forward. I am painting alla prima, or wet paint into wet paint, for this fur, and that allows me to create these really soft transitions between the fur and the background. And I haven't really found a better way to do this other than painting wet paint into wet paint. Alright, so I've let this painting sit for about a week and now the whole portrait is completely dry. I'm now going to come in with some of this refined linseed oil. I'm going to oil out the face so I can see the true colors of the painting. Come in, do a little bit of touch up, and then I can call this painting done. But let's watch this oiling out because wow, This is some magical stuff. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, oiling out just feels like complete magic. And for some of you that do this in your regular practice, this may come as a shock to you that I have just started adapting this. In my previous years, I would actually repaint the area so I could see what I was doing. And boy, oh boy, does this save a lot of time. And this is where the painting is all going to start to come together. You can see with this really fine brush, I'm going in and giving the impression of all these loose individual fur. And this is by far the most satisfying part of any painting project, putting on those last little details to really tie this whole painting together. I let the painting sit for about a week or two before it's ready for a varnish. Now that the painting is all dry and complete, here are the final glamour shots. I will be selling prints of this painting on my website, which I will have a link down in the description. If you like this video, if you learned something, please let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell notification to get notified as soon as I drop a new video. And as always, thanks again so much for watching, and I hope you all have a really great day.